Let's come back to nitric oxide. Let's start with the 101, what it is, and then why it matters.
So nitric oxide is fundamentally a gas that is made inside your blood vessels. And it allows your blood vessels to vasodilate. Okay? So it allows vasodilatation. But in addition to that, what nitric oxide does is that it's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-atherosclerotic. So when you have nitric oxide depletion, you're going to get vasoconstriction, inability to vasodilate. You just can't vasodilate that blood vessel because there's no nitric oxide in there. And it's vasoconstricted. And it's atherosclerotic. So it's got more redox problems in there. And it's going to get a lot of inflammation. And you're going to get atherosclerosis in that artery. So that's what nitric oxide is. And the question is, it's produced. It's a gas. It's very short-acting. So what destroys nitric oxide? We all were born. That's what gives us the flush. The nice glow in your face and everything. It's vasodilation. You walk into a room, you vasoconstrict. You go out, you vasodilate again. That inability to vasodilate and vasoconstrict is called endothelial dysfunction. The first step in atherosclerosis is endothelial dysfunction. And the endothelial dysfunction is because there's a signal produced by your intima, which is the lining of the artery. Now, I told you that there's another layer called the glycocalyx. And when the glycocalyx is destroyed, it stops nitric oxide production in the intima. The nitric oxide is supposed to diffuse into the smooth muscle, which is the next layer, and make it vasodilate. So we have a problem. So stop destroying your glycocalyx. Huge problem, because that's going to drop your nitric oxide levels. So what destroys the glycocalyx is all these reactive oxygen species. Glucose. So glucose, advanced glycation end products, toxins, metals, and lipopolysaccharides, oxidized LDL. All these things carry charge. They have a molecule that's got a charge on it, and that charge goes against that negatively charged glycocalyx. Why is it negatively charged? Because it repels the red cells that are flowing in the vessels. So that's why they don't stick to each other, right? They repel each other. You get rid of that glycocalyx, now that negatively charged red cells are going to bind, and it's going to cause clumping of red cells on the walls. And then you activate the intima as well. So we have a problem. So nitric oxide, if you denude the endothelium, you take out that one single layer, then the muscle is not going to vasodilate. Nitric oxide, so what's destroying nitric oxide? This is a very important one. What's destroying our nitric oxide? Comes down to many things, but the most important one, 90% of the problem, is lipid peroxidation. This is very important. You got to remember this. So it's the lipid peroxidation, the oxidation of your lipids. Why is this so important? Because all your cell membranes are made of fat. So everything, every cell in your body has fat in it. So does the LDL molecule. But every cell membrane is fat. Now along comes a reactive oxygen species of any kind, comes and it attacks one. And I told you that it attacks one, it destroys one lipid moiety in it, and that causes a chain reaction in that cell. So now the entire membrane is dysfunctional. And you know that now the outside of the inside of the cell won't communicate very well. The ion channels get affected. Molecules going in and out get affected. So you get a dysfunctional cell. But the other thing is that when you get this lipid peroxidation that's occurring, they go and they attack the PUFAs, the omega 6 in the walls of the cells. They attack them. Yeah, sure they do. But in the process, when they're doing that, they start this chain reaction where hundreds and hundreds of damaged lipid particles are being produced, and then you start producing more and more two molecules. One is called the aldehyde, one is called MDA, and the other one is 4-HNE. Now, when you produce these two molecules, they actually cause even more damage. They completely shut down the nitric oxide production, that whole chain. So these molecules attack the nitric oxide, destroys the nitric oxide. But more importantly, there's a thing called enos, which is the enzyme that generates the nitric oxide. It destroys that. Not only does it do that, but when it breaks that molecule up into more pieces, into 2 pieces, those pieces cause even more damage. So now they produce more reactive oxygen species. And then these molecules also block the receptor of nitric oxide. So now basically you're done. You're not making any nitric oxide inside that particular cell. So if that cell is in your blood lining, now your blood lining, it cannot vasodilate properly. The problem today is we have nitric oxide deficiency mostly because of lipid peroxidation. Lipid peroxidation is occurring, damage to your lipids because of reactive oxygen species. So again, if you back engineer, you need to get rid of the reactive oxygen species. Where are they coming from? They're coming because they are not being destroyed because we don't have reducing capacity and we're making too much reactive oxygen species. Where are we making most of them? In your mitochondria. Which mitochondria? All over the place. But the worst ones are in your liver and in your gut. See? So reverse engineer it. Where are the mitochondria most dysfunctional today? And producing lots of reactive oxygen species. They're starting in the gut and the liver. Then they're going to cause all the other mitochondria to also dysfunction. When your mitochondria in your brain doesn't work too good, you get mental fog. When your mitochondria in your coronaries don't work very well, then you're going to get vasoconstriction. When your mitochondria in your heart muscle doesn't work very well, you get diastolic dysfunction. That's CHF. Oh yeah, I got CHF with normal ejection fraction. That's just an energy problem. That's because your myocytes don't have enough energy to vasodilate because of mitochondrial dysfunction. So mitochondrial dysfunction will start occurring, and the phenotype of mitochondrial dysfunction will depend on which organ it's affecting. But coming back to the nitric oxide, so the nitric oxide deficiency that we are now seeing these days, it's a huge problem mostly because of the lipid peroxidation. If you have too much omega-6 in your cell membranes, because they have a double bond, they are prone to oxidation. That is why I like omega-3. That is why I'm also not against saturated fat, because saturated fat does not have that double bond and it's not going to undergo oxidative stress. But when you have excessive omega-6 from seed oils, that is why you'll see in all my talks, I talk about omega-6 from seed oils. You need to get rid of seed oils. They're industrial. They are made in a power plant that actually looks like it's in Saudi Arabia somewhere. It looks so amazing. And it's making something you're going to eat. I'm not eating anything out of that plant. So they are all made in industrial plants. They're full of hexane. They're full of other chemicals that decolorizes them and deodorizes them, and they're all omega-6. And we don't need that much omega-6. Our omega-6 is supposed to be a small part of our caloric intake today. In some of our parts of our country, 40%, 30% of our calories are coming from omega-6 oils. They're very inflammatory. They're very prone. So you see, they're very prone to oxidation. So you're making reactive oxygen species. Now you got a fat in your cells that is so susceptible to oxidative stress. You're basically becoming rancid. So if you eat vegetable seed oils, you are becoming rancid. Then you're wondering why you're sick. Because once your lipid membranes become oxidized, your entire cellular machinery is not going to work very well. So I already told you about nitric oxide, lipid peroxidation affecting your entire cellular membranes. And this will cause a huge problem. Now, there are ways that we actually detect that this is happening in your body. There are blood tests. Like, for example, this thing that I order, ADMA levels, right? It's part of my advanced lipid panel. If it's high, I know your nitric oxide production's shot. So I back engineer and I see that, yep, it's because you're eating too much vegetable seed oils. And let's try to restore some of this cellular function. I'm going to give you things that are going to make your cell membranes less susceptible to lipid oxidation. So I'm going to give you some supplements, and then I'm going to turn over your fats quickly. Now, the trouble with omega-6, when they are in your cell walls, they can stay in there for 6 months, 9 months. So those changes don't occur very quickly. They can take a long time to turn over. That's why patients sometimes come to me and they say that, oh, but look at this, my omega-6 level is still high, but I stopped eating vegetable seed oils. Well, it can take 6 months or a year to change. And in the meantime, I give them lots of omega-3. So why am I giving them so much omega-3? Because ultimately, it's not the omega-6 absolute level. It's the ratio, because they all, omega-3 and omega-6 fight for the same substrate. So give them more omega-3, they're going to get there's going to be competition, and then omega-3 is less susceptible to oxidation. So that's how I deal with the omega-6s. But yeah, it's omega-6. So fats are important. So there's no doubt fats are important. Fats are important, but not for the reasons that we've been taught. The lipids are very important. It's because we are damaging our lipids in our body. And we're damaging them because we have too much reactive oxygen species and inability to reduce themselves. And therefore, our enzyme systems don't keep up, and we have way too much oxidative stress in our body. And these molecules, look, you produce reactive oxygen species in a tissue, but when these aldehydes, the lipid molecules, when they travel around the body, they create inflammation all over the body, all over. So you say that, how come I got it in my coronaries? How come I got it in my carotids? How come I got it in my brain? And yet it all started, for example, in your gut. It's a problem. It's because you're getting lipid peroxidation. This is the word you got to remember. It's called lipid peroxidation, and they're occurring all over the body, and we can't have that. So we got to get rid of that. Yeah. So nitric oxide is so sensitive to superoxides. I can't tell you how sensitive they are, because it's a gas. It binds to it immediately. All these free radicals bind to nitric oxide, destroy it, and then they produce this thing called reactive nitrogen species. Reactive nitrogen species, which is the product of what happens after a superoxide and nitric oxide has interacted, these reactive nitrogen species, they're even worse than the reactive oxygen species. They're terrible. They cause even more problems. They cause more vasoconstriction, more oxidative stress, because it's a very, very bad radical. A radical, the one that will attack another, and before you know it, you get this whole cascade of inflammatory substrate that's occurring. So this is very, very important.
High level, practically, what's the best way for somebody who just learned all the physiology to support their NO production?
I'm going to answer that, but I just want to say something else about the clinical manifestations of an inability to vasodilate. And you can measure that, by the way. So the manifestations can be things like mental fog, of course, but the other one that is erectile dysfunction. And I find this very disturbing, because people are just thinking that, oh, they have some ED, so they'll just go ahead and take those drugs. And yeah, it'll improve that, but it doesn't take care of the root cause of the problem. And they will become cardiac patients. Sooner or later, they will have manifestations of vascular disease elsewhere, because the earliest stage is an inability to vasodilate. So ED is very, very important. You're having mental fog, you probably have an inability to vasodilate again. Because remember, in your brain, the way one part of the brain, the other part works is through vasodilation, right? You vasodilate in this part, you vasoconstrict in this part, you vasodilate here. And that's called the cerebral autoregulation. That's all dependent on the ability to instantaneously produce nitric oxide in different parts of the brain in the vasculature. So this is very important. So mental fog is a huge problem. So that's why in inflammation, you get problems with mental fog as well, because inflammation decreases your nitric oxide levels. See how it all ties in? So mental fog. Mental fog is not to be taken lightly. It's not because you didn't sleep enough last night. It could be. But mental fog is a problem. It means you're toxic. You have too much reactive oxygen species, and your physiology is not right. Mental fog is not to be taken lightly. So coming back to how we can best improve our nitric. Look, people give you supplements. Yeah, fine. But you need nitrates in your diet. Okay? And stop using mouthwash, of course. The nitrates need to be absorbed in your gut, and they need the right pH. What's that got to do? It's all electrons again. It's all the charged particles, you see. But you need nitrates in your diet. That's why I like to still leave my patients on some cruciferous vegetables, because you need nitrates. Nitrates are found in the green leafy vegetables, so you need enough of those. That's one thing. The second thing to improve is you need to knock down your reactive oxygen species production. So you need a nice healthy gut that's not leaking. You need lots of good microbiome so that you get a nice mucin layer, so that you don't get translocation of lipopolysaccharides, which then meet your immune system. Your immune system is in the gut, 80% of it. And when they get stimulated, they produce a lot of reactive oxygen species. They produce a lot of ROS, because that's what cells do, immune cells. Immune cells produce a lot of reactive oxygen species. They all then go over to your liver, together with the lipopolysaccharides, cause more inflammation in the liver. The liver wants to attack these things, makes more reactive because that's all it knows how to do. It kills things through reactive. How does your white cell kill a bacterium? How does it do it? Well, there are many ways. One of them is that they produce chemicals, especially the T cells, for example. They'll make chemicals that will destroy that foreign particle. But the reactive oxygen species are produced in macrophages. And we measure that in the MPO levels, and maybe do the advanced lipid panel. So your ability you need reactive oxygen species, because that's how they work. And you always need a little bit of reactive oxygen species. Why did the body make it? Because they're signaling molecules. They actually do other things as well. So in the mitochondria, a normal amount of reactive oxygen species is always produced. Where do they go in day-to-day life, in a healthy person, where I'm making ROS, I'm making it, but only a small amount? What do they do, even though they're a small amount? Why did we design it like that? Because they actually go to the mitochondrial DNA and your somatic DNA, and they send signals there. And there's a feedback that's telling the energy machinery, which is your mitochondria, and telling your cells what the situation is. So that your nucleus, which produces all the proteins, the translation of proteins, because the histones unwind, make new proteins. They close up, they close them. And then, of course, the methylation and epigenetics also is all controlled by these reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species produce not only inflammatory damage, but when you have too much of it, it affects your chromosomes. So it turns on genes, turns off genes, makes new proteins, makes different types of proteins. So it's a cell signaling molecule. Too much reactive oxygen species is no good for you. Small amount will give the right signal to the nucleus and keep it posted as to what the energy state of the body is. So we always need some. That's why in the past we used to hear that you mustn't take too much antioxidants. Not too much, because you don't want to quench it all completely. So we got to be a little bit careful here, because I've seen people who've taken massive amounts of antioxidants and they're still not very well, and they're just taking too much. See? Because you need some reactive oxygen species. So nitric oxide, if you want to preserve nitric oxide, what's going to destroy it is lipid peroxidation. Watch what lipids you're consuming. Have more omega-3 in your diet. Cut out the omega-6, which comes to you not only in vegetable seed oils, but also, for example, the meat. If your meat is from cows that are mostly eating the stuff they feed them these days instead of grass, right? Then you're going to get a lot of omega-6, because if they're eating grains, they're eating corn, they're going to get omega-6 in them. So we got to be a little bit careful about that as well. So less omega-6, more omega-3, and then eating foods with lots of phytonutrients in it, a lot of polyphenols, because they're going to turn on your endogenous NRF2, which is going to be it knows what to do. It has its own feedback mechanisms. So it'll give you just the right amount of anti-inflammatory activity. Fix your gut. Get rid of the fatty liver. Don't put toxins in your body. Get rid of toxins in your entire life. That means stop putting unnecessary creams on your body, unnecessary shampoo, unnecessary makeup, unnecessary underarm deodorant that contains toxins in it, such as aluminum, because these are all xenobiotics. They're not supposed to be there. And when they go to the liver, what they're going to do in the liver? They're going to produce what? They're going to produce reactive oxygen species. So all xenobiotics produce reactive oxygen species. And when they do that, they're going to destroy our nitric oxide levels. When I tell my patients to clean up their act, that means they go home and they stop putting unnecessary creams on them, and they look at the wardrobe, even the washing liquid, they clean up everything, ED gets better. Clean up the diet, ED gets better. Start doing some intermittent fasting, ED gets better. They also detoxify very easily because they don't realize how toxic they were. ED gets better naturally if you make all these changes, understanding that ultimately they got ED because they have nitric oxide dysfunction. There's some ED that is actually secondary to vascular disease itself, but those are older people where the artery may be narrowed, but that's very rare. Most of them, it's functional, it's metabolic. You have ED, you have nitric oxide deficiency. You have nitric oxide deficiency, you have too much oxidative stress. You have too much oxidative stress, you better find the cause of it and increase your reducing capacity to do that. To increase your reducing capacity, you need to do some exercises, change your diet and lifestyle. Exercise we don't talk about, but the exercise that Dr. J likes to do is HIIT. I like high-intensity interval training. And I did a little video on it where you run real fast for a few minutes and then you literally just stop and just relax. And then do it again after a few minutes. And so you're doing short bursts of activity with total relaxation in between. And that has been shown to actually improve your mitochondrial resilience and your ability to take care of your reactive oxygen species, because you're stimulating also new mitochondria, better mitochondria, which are going to produce less reactive oxygen species the next time you exercise. So you do need to exercise. Exercise is part of this. You need to get plenty of sleep. You got to drink plenty clean water, filtered water. You got to look for every source of contamination in your life. Don't think that just because your house is looking clean that it's not contaminated. If you're living in an old home, you may have lead. Get tested. Get your water source tested. Get yourself tested. I'm surprised how many people are toxic. Do a simple urine test that tells you whether you have toxicity. If you have toxicity, that does not mean you're going for chelation each time. No. There's simple supplements that you can do. But look, toxicity is not talked about by the regular MD. Toxicity, oh yeah, that's somebody else going to take it. No. This is a medical problem. If you think you're toxic, it's very simple. Do a toxicity test. Find out what's in your body that shouldn't be in your body. It gets there, inevitably. I had a patient the other day who had an arsenic level that was 10 times higher than normal. And he didn't know where the arsenic came from. And I said to him, are you sure someone's not trying to knock you off? And he laughed and he said, no. But I don't know where his arsenic came from, but probably water, maybe some of the food sources that he's having. But you see how important it is. Now he's looking at the food sources, where he's getting his arsenic, how he's washing his rice every day, and then throwing out the water, because that's a very common source of arsenic. So he's going to source his food right, he's going to wash his food right, but he's going to make changes. He's going to make some changes in his life. And by the way, where does arsenic affect you? Right at the mitochondrial level. So I think that doing toxicity testing in patients who have coronary artery disease, inflammation, fatty liver is an important part of my workup, which I never used to do before. But now I order a toxicity test on all because it's very, very helpful. Yeah. And the other thing is, the quality of the food that you eat, that it changes the way you look at your food. Because I know that 20 to 25% of spices have mold in them, because they get grown in a country with hot, humid climates and stored in not the best way. And by the time they get packaged and sent over here, they have mold in them. Because I often wonder where the mold came from. They don't have chronic sinusitis, they don't have other problems, but they got mold. And it's because every day they're eating these foods that may have mold in them. So I think toxin testing has really opened my eyes as to another factor that deranges your metabolism, because your body has to deal with it. So xenobiotics are very, very important. So I just define them all as xenobiotics. Things that are not supposed to be in your body don't need to be there because your body has never seen that postal code before, doesn't know what to do with it.
Since you made it to the end of this clip, I know you're going to love the full episode. Click here to watch. I'll see you over there.
Visceral fat is pathological always. It should never happen, but we have an epidemic of it going on right now. Estimates are anywhere between 40 and 50% of the population.